morning, guys. I want to talk a little bit about something that everyone should kind of know about. Anyone who has back pain, anyone who's a strength athlete, anyone who's a physique competitor, your glutes are very important. Now, some of the things I want to talk about is how we train our glutes and how you access your glutes as well. So I want to start off with the fact that first thing, you're not going to be able to access your glute in entirety if you're in any form of anterior pelvic tilt. So if you look at all these people, if you look at people doing kickbacks, if you look at people doing glute movements and their belly down, if their hips are rotated this way, if they're tipped down to the ground, if their belly button's tipped down to the ground, if you're looking at them and their torso doesn't look like a nice neutral rib cage moving through their hip girdle, they're using their lumbar, they're using their back extensors, they're straining on their hamstrings, they're using mostly only quads. Now, this isn't my opinion, this is just a functional matter. If you look at the function of the glutes, I'm going to read this directly off of a page I pulled up. The function of the glutes, the glute muscles includes extensions, abduction, lateral external rotation, and medial internal rotation of the hip joint. The gluteus maximus also supports the extended knee throughout the iliotibial tract. Now, anything in that sentence, did it say anything about your lumbar, your low back extensors? No, it did not. It said specifically it extends and moves through the hips. Now, your hips, if they're tipped down, guess what? They can't extend forward. So one thing that we need to fix here, if you're a bikini competitor and you want to grow your glutes, you can do as much side raised legging, as much kickback leg stuff that you want to possibly do to isolate your glutes. They will not get to the actual size that you want by these sole isolation movements alone. If you're stuck belly down, if you're stuck in anterior pelvic tilt, the only thing this is going to do is halt your strength. It's going to cause you a lot of vertebrae pain, and it's also going to cause a lot of other dysfunctions. So some of the things that we'll see with these dysfunctions are knee pain, ankle pain. A lot of times you'll get some pain in the hip socket, in the low lumbar, SI joint dysfunction, and all of these things solely root from what's going on at your torso. One of the basic functions that everyone needs to understand how to do is, one, how to stack their rib cage, which in turn is actually pulling their ribs out of the flared position, stacking them down into a straight line with the front of your hip bones. Secondary for this is, once you've stacked the rib cage, the goal is to keep the torso nice and tight like someone's about to whack you in the belly, and you need to then breathe deep into that low belly, which inflates your torso this way, which in fact stabilizes your spine. Stacking your rib cage also in fact pulls yourself out of anterior pelvic tilt, and it pulls your hips under your rib cage. As your hips get now pulled underneath your rib cage here, now you can clench your glutes and extend them forward. Or now you can clench your glutes and externally rotate like you're supposed to in a lot of our lower body movements. Some things that really start happening here if you're not able to access your glutes, not being able to use your glutes normally comes from a higher problem. It comes from a torso dysfunction, which normally means that your hips are out of position, you're messing up your lumbar, and this may not be something that's bothering you right now, but coming from someone who used to put in absurd amounts of weight on my back, even it becomes point where this doesn't just start hurting during your training movements. You will get to the point where sitting in a chair, standing upright, bending over to pick something up very simply, those joints in those low back, the lumbar region, your vertebrae, your SI joint, there's supposed to be a certain amount of movement in these areas. There's supposed to be a certain amount of elasticity in these movements where they're supposed to shift just enough and move just enough through a certain range of motion When we get outside those range of motion, we get an insane amount of inflammation at the cartilage and at the joint level, which causes SI joint dysfunction, a lot of bit of pain. So some of the things we need to start focusing on, if you want to actually train your glutes the proper way, the first thing that you actually need to do is regain control of your rib cage and regain control of your abdominals. This also falls under the fact of understanding mechanically how to hinge through the hips properly. Because guess what? If you're stuck in anterior pelvic tilt, you're most likely not hinging properly either, because you're going belly down. You're no longer maintaining a stacked rib cage. All you're doing is sticking your tail back and letting your ribs flare up. So now we're actually getting this type of curve through the low back instead of having that nice straight rigid angle, which then my femur comes out of my hip socket right here. Now this is moving mechanically. This is not the movement that we want. We don't want to see this scoop through the torso as you extend through your movements. We don't want to see this reverse scoop through the hips as you kick backwards or as you extend backwards. Even if you look at something as simple as a glute extension laying on your back, your belly should not be belly up to the ceiling like this. It should be still a stacked rib cage, tightened rib cage belly on the front. There should be a straight line when you fully extend through that glute bridge from the tip of your knee all the way to your shoulder. It should be nice and straight all the way through that line there. If this is dimpled down, if you're still stuck in your hip crease, you didn't actually fully extend through the pattern, and you're most likely dealing with an abdominal issue. Most strength athletes do not have abs that are strong enough for the stuff that they're asking of them. It's why a lot of people get lots of back pain, one-sided back pain, right-sided back pain, pelvic shifts, pelvic torques. If your abdomen and your abdominals, your internal obliques, external obliques, low abdominals, serratus, intercostals, all these musculature, transverse abdominis, all these muscles that work through your torso and create stability and rigidity for your spine and actually create proper hip posturing, if these are not in balance and you just have brutally strong legs, your legs will stop being brutally strong because you're going to get pain in areas that's going to limit you on how much force you can exert. We've all seen the guy who says, I used to squat, now my knees hurt. Proper squatting doesn't cause knee pain. Improper squatting and improper deadlifting causes knee and back pain. If you're bracing properly, if you're doing the movements properly, your knees should be aligning properly over top of the ankles. You should be internally, externally rotating properly. The joints, you should not feel it all during movement patterns. You should feel the musculature. If you're feeling a joint, if you're feeling your shoulder, if you're feeling your hip, if you're feeling your knee, something's wrong with the pattern. You're doing something wrong. Unless there's an actual physical deformity where you physically have torn something in one of these joints, you should not be feeling pain in the joint while you're doing it. If your coach is telling you, oh, well, your knee pain, it'll just go away eventually. No, it will not. If something is causing knee pain, if something's causing hip pain, if something's causing back pain, it's being done wrong. I'm just saying this. This is pretty straight up. You should not get physical joint pain with your movements. Coming back to this about getting glute access, I've put up quite a few different things that actually show how to fix the rib flaring, how to fix the abdominal capacity, how to fix the diaphragmatic breathing. Pay attention to some of these movements. Give them a try. If you suck at some of these movements, if they're difficult, if they're really challenging, you probably have a pattern that you need to fix. There's probably a weakness that you haven't been addressing. Now, guess what? We're all trapped inside, but guess what? You can still do abdominal work. You can still do mobility work. You can still do hip cars. You can still do a lot of functional training with solely just your body weight. You can actually still get a very large intensity spike if you're doing these movements properly. There's a million things you can do from your own floor that's going to, 1, create better back health, 2, create better hip mobility, and 3, it's going to actually help increase the muscle tissue around the torso. Your torso, as the muscle tissue gets stronger and as it develops, your waistline is actually going to start shrinking because you hold tension all around a lot better. You're not stuck belly down, anteriorly tipped. This belly down formation gives us a very large looking waistline. Okay? So I went over quite a few different things today, but that's just my piece on that. I've been wanting to talk about this for a little bit of while. You should not be anteriorly tipped with your hips down when you're trying to access your glutes. Ladies, with your kickbacks, you should not be arching at your back. Guess what? The arching at the back, it still gives you a little bit of access to your glute medius, which is that part of the glute that's right at the top. But guess what? The bulk of the glute, the large areas of the glute, will not actually fire, and they won't actually function properly if you're in anterior pelvic tilt. Now, this is not my opinion, like I said. This is just function of science. If you look at the way the body is built and the way anatomically we're supposed to move, it defies how you're supposed to move, and it's only going to cause you pain. All right, guys. Happy Friday. Take what I told you, and I hope it helps everyone out a little bit.